empowering the next generation to know how to live with confidence and precision, to move with mastery and meaning. This is a spirit that is free, traveling one coast to the next, escaping the comforts of home. This is finding new friends and exploring the warrior within to destinations amazing, to destinations unknown. This is what it means to keep pounding, to cheer for the home team without hesitation. This is love and life, success and sacrifice. This is Yolanda Trotman, and this is The Conversation.
Hello, everyone. How are you guys doing on this fabulous hump day? It is June the 29th. It is 8 o'clock. I know before you all say anything else, what's been going on with the conversation? Where you been, girl? Let me tell you, life, lawyering, and everything in between. But in the meantime, have been working on quite a few things behind the scenes for episodes of the conversation to start next month. Which they will, especially since we're in a political season, and especially with the new series that's coming out, which I will tell you about at the end of the show. So welcome to the conversation. As you know, this is a conversation. If you've seen the promo, or if you received the text message, or if you've seen it on social media, this is a conversation that is so critically important that I had to stop everything literally and make sure we had this special conversation tonight on this day, because everything that has happened within the past 4 days is ultimately going to affect all of us. And I felt that it was so critically important that we have a conversation, a very open conversation, that I strongly encourage you to drop your comments. I strongly encourage you to ask questions, and I strongly encourage you to share this, because this conversation is about not just one particular Supreme Court case, although this court case is crucial, but because of this shift that we have seen, this pendulum shifting, which is the title of this show, that the pendulum has swung or has shifted, because it truly has. And I think it is so critically important for all of us to understand why any of this should matter. Because oftentimes we kind of look at politics or legal decisions from a 30,000 foot view, not understanding how it's going to affect us and how it's going to affect us for a generation. So that's why the conversation is going on tonight. A very special, almost emergency episode of the conversation, because it's that important. So before we get started, if you're catching us on YouTube or on Facebook, make sure you drop in the comments where you're watching from so that we see it. If you have questions, make sure you drop them in the comments. We will see those because we want to get to as many questions as we can tonight. I'm sure you have seen some of this as far as legal analysis on television, but if not, we're going to give you the real raw deal. We're going to give you the straight up, here's the history, here's why it's important. And then we're also going to come back towards the end of this to kind of put this together in terms of, well, what do we do? Here's what's happened. Here's why it's bad. But this is what we can do now to help at least shift the pendulum in the opposite direction. So drop in the comments where you are watching from. Hey, Edward, I see you. Also drop in the comments any questions that you have. As always, if you've not already done so, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow the IG page, and like the Facebook page at All Things at the Convo Pod Show. Specifically, make sure you take a moment and slide over to YouTube and subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is The Conversation with Yolanda Trotman and I. Our team is in the process of updating the website with all of the most recent episodes from season 4. Can't believe it's been 4 seasons, but for season 4 of the pod show, and make sure you can catch all previous episodes back there as well. So regardless of wherever you're watching us from, make sure that you tune in, share this now, share this later if you're watching the replay, and make sure that you're helping to get the word out. Like I said at the top of the show, it's so important. We had to stop, my guest and I, my co-host and I had to stop what we were doing to have this very important conversation. Now that said, let me tell you who we have on the show tonight. Now, some of you all may remember him when we did, I think that was in 2020, when we did the How to Get Away with Murder 2 episodes. When we got towards the season finale, it was a whole crew of us. He was the only male And boy, did we have a good old time talking about how to get away with murder. So you may remember him from those 2 episodes from 2020. But I wanted to have him specifically on the show because we had talked about this because we went to law school together. Hey, Beverly, I see you. Thanks for chiming in. But we went to law school together at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law, Hale Pitt. And I'm not going to say the first day, but within the first few days of law school, we instantly had a connection. And what was so incredible about our law school experience is that it was so different, but that's what brought us together back in, I'm about to age myself, but back in 99 when we started, 3 sections, there was only 2 of us in our section. And I say 2 of us, meaning Black folks in our section. And his section and the other section had 5 or 6. So coming into a new city and starting over felt really isolated, but it was something about my guest, my co-host, that I was immediately gravitated towards, and we've been rocking it out as very dear friends for almost 20 years. So my co-host tonight, who is frankly, he's going to say, no, that's not true, but he really is one of the smartest people that I know, especially in terms of legal analysis. At some point he said, damn all of this, and decided to do some other things and follow his passion, but he is incredibly intelligent. We've had some great conversations one-on-one about this, and we want to share those conversations with you tonight. He is the CEO and founder of Zeus Magazine. He is also a filmmaker, producer, actor, and screenwriter. And welcome to the show, none other than my boo. Y'all better say hey, y'all, to Roderick Montrese. Hey, all the way from Chicago, y'all, from the Windy City. He took a gap and even adjusted for the time zone change. And that says a lot, because he don't do that for just everybody. Hey, boo.
Hey,
how are you doing?
How are you? Thank you so much. Again, I don't think I deserve all those accolades because you are just a tremendous attorney in your own right, like really taking Charlotte over like a Targaryen. So, but thank you so much. I'm so honored that you had me back. We always have a good time, and this made me pull out, take off my retirement wig, because it is this important. Like, this is for all you Harry Potter fans. Let's draw the score. He has the wand. We are attacking Hogwarts, and we done told Hermione to go home because we don't like her scrolls. So now we stuck with Ronald Weasley. Okay, that's where we are.
I have no idea what any of that means.
Right. So for the Harry Potter fans who know, we don't know where the Horcruxes are. We don't know where anything is, and this is really DEFCON 4, because never in my lifetime, as we were in law school talking about cases and precedent and was discussed stare decisis, did we ever think that we would be living in a lifetime where Roe versus Wade would be not only just overturned, but so callously and judiciously imperfectly overturned, and to know what their next bus stops are, because they've already marked those. So again, we'll discuss that too. But, back then, we were in law school when the big thing was Bush versus Gore, and that was like the big hullabaloo. And we were also in law school when 9/11 happened and the Patriot Act was being passed and those type of like legal discussions. But I never thought that I would be living in a lifetime where we're literally having a discussion of, hey girl, Roe versus Wade just got overturned, and they coming for us next. So
So before we get started, because I wanted to start with some of the basic terms that people may have heard on television, and we can just kind of explain that. So for those of you who are tuning in, 1, make sure you share this. 2, drop in the comments where you're watching from, and make sure you drop your questions in. And we also want to know how you're feeling about this too, because this is also a place where you can say and express yourself freely with no issues. So the one big thing that I think that is so particularly important about what's just happened is that what we all learn in law school, one of the first things we learn is something called stare decisis, which means let the decision stand. And that was the whole idea of precedent. Like, if precedent or something exists, that decision remains unless there is something separate and apart from that set of facts, that circumstance, that decision that decision remains. When you hear the term precedent, that's what that means. And I think what is so incredibly important with this particular case is that, 1, we have to talk about the majority, Rod. 2, we have to talk about, basically, they flat out lied to Congress, Gorsh, Kavanaugh, and Amy.
Right.
I should probably call her by her full name, but Amy,
Amy.
just flat out lied to Congress because
Correct.
just flat out lied. Specifically asked about Roe versus Wade. They all said it was precedent, and even Amy Coney Barrett went as far as saying, yes, it's been challenged many times, but that would be horrible to overturn it and all that. And yet here they are, first chance they get doing so. So, is that Janae from Colorado? Okay, but anyway, hey girl, hey Tiki, we see you. Brennan, we see you. So drop your questions in the comments. Make sure you share it. So that's the main thing. First, understand stare decisis, let the decision stand. Second issue, okay, but these aren't justices who've been on the court for 10 years, 20 years, and we kind of had an idea of how they were going to handle. These are all new justices who all testified before Congress and all were specifically asked about Roe versus Wade and all said it was precedent and all said it was the law of the land. Thoughts on that? Let's start there, Rod.
Okay, so I'm actually going to take the causal chain all the way back to 2016 because I have to do that because the reason why we are here is because 53% of the white women did not believe fat meat was greasy. They did not believe.
Wait, pause. You said it too fast because the Southern's coming out. Slow that down. Say it again.
So we have to remember that 53% of white women voted for Donald Trump in the 2016 election. And because they voted against their own interests, that is the primary reason why we're here. Yes, there are other coefficient of other factors in the election that may have happened, but the reason, the causal chain, in my view, started back in 2016 when we knew and were warned that up to 3 to 4 Supreme Court justice vacancies could happen. Besides the shenanigans that are going on with the seat with Merrick Garland and Mitch McConnell holding up that seat, we were warned that we were going to have 3 seats available. So a lot of this, while it may come off the same as blame shifting, was highly preventable if the electorate body who was going to be directly affected really took this seriously. And that is the first primary part of that. So to answer and to go towards your question is that, so many people knew they were lying. I knew Amy Coney Barrett was lying when she was testifying. There was nothing in her background as a professor at Notre Dame with 12 children and a devout Catholic that was going to tell me that she was going to uphold Roe versus Wade, regardless of her judicial beliefs. There was nothing in Brett Kavanaugh's position on his presentation, as a conservative judge who was part of the Clinton impeachment proceedings and investigations that told me that he would do that too. So not only shame on us for being fooled, shame on Susan Collins, shame on Mitt Romney, shame on all the people who decided to join in on the boondoggle to say, oh, I believed him, I looked into his heart, and now are saying, oh, he lied to us. Because I don't think anyone credibly really believed that they were really going to do this. Neil Gorsuch, a disciple, literally the Peter of Justice Scalia, we knew that was going to be, what those holdings would be. And I think that the hope was that he was only going to get one appointment. So one appointment wasn't ever. But then as the appointments kept coming in, the writing became on the wall. So I also think it's very important for our audience to understand what Roe versus Wade stands for and what it doesn't stand for. Because
yes, for sure.
Because a lot of what the majority has done and will do moving forward is how they frame the case. So if you ask the question, does the Constitution provide a federal right to an abortion? That is a different question than the proposition in Roe that the federal government cannot force a woman to have a child based upon the substantive due process clause of the 14th Amendment. That is a two entirely different propositions. So, if you frame it in its classical, does the Constitution provide a right to an abortion, using very lazy legal reading and looking at the Constitution, no abortion here, no freedom here. And that is really going to be the playbook moving forward for every right that has been expanded we've seen in the past years as far as, marriage equality, contraception, interracial marriage, and then moving to their crown jewel, segregation and overturning Brown versus Board of Education. But I'm getting slightly ahead of myself. But yeah, but it's very important to know that it was never about having a legal right to an abortion, as opposed to whether or not the government can force a woman to have a child by denying her access to an abortion.
And so that's important. Let me pause you there for a second, because what you're hearing pundits say, like they gloss over the whole concept of substantive due process, even though the opinion sort of talks about it, but they take it. And for people who don't know this, they don't just say, well, let's go back to background. So Dobbs, Jackson, state of Mississippi, single abortion clinic in Mississippi, sues. Mississippi's law is that a woman cannot have an abortion after 15 weeks. All of that comes up to Supreme, and I'm being very general, but that's just that's the basic Mississippi law that was before the Supreme Court. The problem that we have is that the Supreme Court, and of course we knew this was coming because we knew the opinion was leaked. Lots of theories and terms. Was it really leaked, or was somebody trying to warn us? Or was it the right saying, hey, this is coming, let's get prepared for the, this is the first shot of many that we're getting ready to do now that this pendulum is shifted? Who knows? We don't know. We'll never know that. But the problem with this decision, and I think what most people fail to realize, they could have just said, Mississippi, you can do this. But they went the step further, say, not just Mississippi, you can do this, but by the way, any state can just outlaw abortion because it's not in the Constitution. There's no constitutional right, and they don't apply the substantive due process analysis that Roe versus Wade stands for. Now, for somebody watching Raw and they don't understand what substantive due process is, how would you explain it in simple terms?
So in the Constitution, you have two forms of due process. You have what's called like formal due process. So the rights, which is where you get your Miranda rights from, the rights of notice, the right to a trial, such that the formal notice of due process where you must know what charge is being brought against you and to kind of know what proceedings are in front of you. So they kind of like the formal proceedings, like the pomp and circumstance or the ceremonial process. Substantive due process goes to really the individual liberty and process by which you as an American can function and the limits by which the government can limit your individual liberty, your personal decisions, your process of being a personhood. So prior to Dobbs, the Supreme Court had said procreation, marriage, child rearing. These are all within the realm of substantive due process that you as a person retain without substantive government intrusion. Now, it's also important to know that as a general rule, the federal government can't infringe on your fundamental rights. Like that's not a contention here, But as we're saying is there's a difference between taking a law and just throwing it out a window and limiting it or making narrow exceptions to it. So I think that in this case, again, the way in which they framed it is they wanted to frame it this way so that they could set up the dominoes to kind of fall all the way they wanted to fall.
And so if you have questions, make sure you put them in the comments. And if you have comments, put them in the comments in terms of how you're taking this and what you're seeing in terms of how people reacted to it. As I said at the top of the show, I was out of town and actually we had talked about this, about doing a show, and we thought it was going to come out the week prior. Was talking about you didn't talk to me in Hogwarts language because I don't understand any of that. But we talked about this in general, saying like we really need to do a show about this. And I remember the day it came in, like I text you and you were like, yeah, this is some bullshit. And it's like, yeah, we got to have this conversation. So, what Dobbs ultimately does, for those of you tuning in, or whether you're catching it here or catching it on the replay, is that it takes I won't say it, but Clarence Thomas specifically signals what the next playbook is. And so, and what the next steps are, basically saying, hey, by the way, send these cases up because, hey, we don't think it applies to any of this too. Now, before we start talking about Clarence Thomas, excuse me, but before we start talking about Clarence Thomas's decision or his opinion, where he cites himself, 3 times? Who does that? But I think the thing that's really troubling, and hopefully people are aware of this, is that he's literally telling the American public, this is what we're coming for next, that this is where we're starting, But here are the other things that we would be looking at as a possible legal challenge, which is the right to contraception, which that's huge. This is not just about the right to have an abortion. Now we're talking about the right to have birth control.
Correct.
Period. And don't just think pills, IUDs, like, period. Like, this is condoms, people. Like, this is any right to contraception. He also obviously talks about gay marriage. And what was the third one, Rob? What am I missing? Contraception, gay marriage, and then what was the other one?
And then I foresee is the next checker after that is going to be interracial marriage, the misconjugation statutes. And then finally, what they really are after, what they, as, Senator John Cornyn signaled, in his tweet, now go after Brown versus Board of Education. That is really what they want. And in order to get to Brown versus Board of Education, which is the precedent that was argued by the infamous and famous Thurgood Marshall, that separate but equal is not equal. Literally 1952, we're celebrating like 50 years in 2002. That is what they want. Ultimately, is to dismantle Brown versus Board of Education, thereby eliminating the Civil Rights Act, eliminating Title IX, and relegating all of this back to the states. Because as a general rule, individual states are far more discriminatory and far more insular, and underrepresented minorities are far more defenseless against the states as they are against the federal government. I've always said, when the federal government takes away a right, they take away against for everybody. It's across the board. During the pandemic, it wasn't, okay, Utah, stay open, okay, but New York, you could stay closed. When the federal government does something, it's across the board and generally for everyone's entire good. States are very discriminatory, and that's what the right wants. They want to be able to relegate everything back to the states using a very originalist textual idea of the Constitution, saying unless it's in there, it goes back to the states. And that is what puts women at risk, puts Black people at risk, highly, highly at risk, and puts, gays, lesbians, transgender at risk, because if everything's left to the states, depending on what state you live in, your life, your marriage, your health are in danger.
And that's super important because, and there's a great question from Dream Chaser. We're going to answer that one in just a second. And I think what people have to understand is how this decision, as it takes it beyond just, hey, Mississippi, not only you can do that, but there's no constitutional right here to abortion. Now you're going to have at least half the states on average that are going to pass laws with Republican control state houses and Senate, or however their state is organized. And there's not going to be a whole lot that can be done about it. For example, in North Carolina, while it's Republican control, there's no Republican supermajority, and we have a Democratic governor who can veto it, and there's no supermajority who can generally probably overturn his veto. So we will probably be okay here. But what if you're in South Carolina? What if you are in Georgia? Probably Florida. And so none of us, and I think this is so important, the majority of people watching tonight, the majority of people that we know never lived as adults in the 1970s, in the 60s, in the 50s, where women were dying trying to get an abortion, women who have been raped or incest or any of that. There's no protection for that now. So a state can say 0 abortion, period. Don't care if you've been raped. Don't care if you've been a victim of incest. Don't care if you have a high-risk pregnancy. You have an ectopic pregnancy where you have an egg that's trapped in your fallopian tube that could kill you, or that the pregnancy is a risk to your health. Or even the doctor says, like, this child or this pregnancy could lead to your death. Like, you have 0 right. And I need that to lay down on everybody for a second, because if you're a man, this affects women that whether they're your family members, whether there's co-workers, whatever the case may be. And the fact that justices and states can legislate what a woman can do with her body, with the same people who said, I'm not going to take this vaccine because it's my body, my choice. Okay, so it's your body, your choice when you're talking about taking this shot to your arm. But that same argument has no bearing when you're talking about the decision to give birth and to carry a child to term. Because I think people just think women or they're just getting an abortion, or they have, if they've not had or experienced or known a woman who has had an abortion, they have this idea that it's either an easy decision, or some women use it as contraception. Some of the horrible things I've seen on social media, who are saying, well, it's mostly minority women who are getting it. And first of all, your numbers are flawed, because the 5 major states, Florida, New York, California, Illinois, and I'm missing one, they don't even report the demographics. And that's 1/5 or so of the total number of abortions that are done in our country every year. So you have people who I've seen, Black and white and other races, that point to that number, not understanding. You don't even know the reason why that woman is seeking an abortion. If it's health related, if it's medical issue, if it's medically induced, it could be any number of things. And so I'm getting on a rant, y'all. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. No, because it's so important. Yeah. So go ahead, Ron.
But you raised a very good, important point, because let us also not gloss over one of the primary benefit and motivating factor of overturning Roe versus Wade. It is, yes, it's cloaked in this pro-life Christian evangelical shroud or sheepskin, but what it is really about is increasing the number of white babies born. And
okay, wait a minute. Say that again.
So this is really about increasing the number of white babies born in America against a backdrop of where the white majority are seeing their numbers decline, and they're not seeing enough white births happening in America. So by eliminating abortion, eliminating access to contraception, eliminating interracial marriage, we ultimately get this eugenics mantra of increasing the number of white babies born, thereby combating the Black and brown majority that is happening in America. And unfortunately, that ship has already sailed. Like, that ship sailed in 1994, 1995. So there definitely is a eugenics undertone to this that it would be naive to dismiss or to ignore, because that is really what this is about. I mean, I don't believe that all of these congressmen and all these justices are just touched by the Holy Ghost of Jesus and want to be pro-life. Let's be that's not what this is, So this is definitely a very subtle or overt eugenics undertone of increasing white births in America, and this is their game plan for it.
And so one quick question I want to get to, Dream Chaser 57's question, and shout out Loretta, I see you watching from Atlanta, Tiki from Texas. I'm not sure if this is male or female, so I don't want to assume. Is lying in your confirmation hearing grounds for ethics removal despite the lifetime appointment? That is a great question. Technically, how do you prove that it was a lie? That's the first problem. How do you, because yes, they testified under oath. Yes, in theory, the Senate and the House collectively could do something, but what's your standard? How do you prove that they didn't mean that? And that it was an intentional lie at the time that they made those statements? Because they could say, well, yeah, I did mean that at the time, but the law is fluid, blah, blah, blah. This case wasn't before me, yada, yada, yada. It could be any number of things that they could point to. How do you prove that it was in fact a lie? Right. I don't know. What do you think?
I think you're right. I think you have, I guess they call it a scienter, which is an intent problem, and trying to figure out whether or not the person intentionally lied, or whether they said, well, at the time I meant this during my confirmation hearings, and I really believe that to be true, but the facts of the case presented yielded and necessitated a different result. I think the bigger issue really is not going after the judges for lying, but really holding those are your representatives accountable for being complicit in the big lie. Because even they knew they were lying, even if they did not say they were lying. Mitt Romney knew they were lying. Susan Collins knew. Lisa Murkowski knew. They all knew. And even the Democrats who, went over in a spirit of bipartisanship, they all knew. And I think it's time that we end this kind of kabuki theater of just letting people off the hook just because you look into their hearts and they tell you a good lie. And I think that that's really whose feet you need to hold to the fire, because they have lifetime appointments. I can't remember the last Supreme Court justice that was removed. I don't even know if there has been one. But you could definitely remove your congressman for making poor decisions and being complicit in the turning back of women's reproductive rights in 50 years.
So why should men care about this?
Well, reason men should care about this is because even if you don't have a daughter, even if you don't have a wife, women's rights are human rights. Dewey Cohen, Hillary Clinton. And so it only starts, all it takes is one pebble of the government taking away a woman's right to choose. Then it starts taking away maybe a man's right to a vasectomy, a man's right to Viagra. Like it's only say once you set up the precedent, legal precedent for the Supreme Court to do this, then it just starts to rolling way for states that have more restrictions on your personal autonomy. Everyone was up in arms over a vaccine, right? But now we have Roe versus Wade here, and since your personal liberty can be intruded upon, and the 14th Amendment is not that important, as opposed to the woman's right to choose your personal privacy, then that really does open the door for if there, God forbid, is another pandemic, the courts and the federal government can use Dobbs as precedent to mandate you to take the vaccine because they have now eliminated your right to personal privacy within your personhood. And that is why you as a man should care, because the same way in which they can limit a woman's right to choose, they can limit your right to do with your body. And you are foolish to think that you will not be next.
Do you think if the next goal is to now challenge the right to contraception, do you really think that it's possible that they would take this same position if a case got up to the Supreme Court challenging a man's right to have a vasectomy? Because that's contraception for that very purpose.
No, I think so. Okay, so let's go back. So more kind of history context. So
okay,
as we know, the United States is split into 13 appellate districts. It's 13 appellate districts. So the way in which these cases maneuver through the country is they have these tester cases, feeder cases. One case comes into the district court, through a certain judge, and then it moves to another certain district up to the appellate level in a specific district, and then it moves up to Supreme Court, again, very oversimplified. So the original Griswold was in Connecticut, I believe. So the right to contraception will more than likely come through the Ninth Circuit in California, because that's the most liberal district. And that is the district that this majority has pinpointed out that they plan on looking at every case that is not contextually and constitutionally, originalist. So I think it's going to be somewhere in San Francisco, somewhere in California, in that Ninth Circuit that's notoriously liberal. And it's not going to be a men's right to a vasectomy. It's going to be a woman's access to birth control. And
exactly.
So we won't. So the man won't really get to feel the pinch until they move to their next thing and choosing their own wife, right? Once heterosexual interracial marriages start to be dissolved, that's when men are going to start feeling the pinch, and then they're going to go, "Oh my God, how did this happen?" It happened 4 years ago in Dobbs versus Jackson, and it happened 2 years ago in whatever case. Because if we lose the midterms, these dominoes are going to start falling very, very, very quickly because they will not have any resistance to their plans.
So I think I do want to spend a few more minutes here before we move on to, okay, so what do we do? But we talked about this at the top of the hour for those of you who are just tuning in or chiming in. And hey, Jonathan, I see you watching from Birmingham. And if you haven't done so already, drop a comment in terms of where you are watching from. But I think the issue that you talked about and what Clarence Thomas signals to other states is, again, right to contraception. And then the next one ultimately being challenging gay marriage. And again, you may not be gay. You may not know anybody that's gay. You may not know anybody that's in a gay marriage. But why should someone who is straight care about that?
Because again, it is the way in which the government can invade your personal liberty and your personal decision-making and your personal autonomy that is quite alarming. Because once they, when gun advocates are like, "Oh, you can't take my guns," the fierce protectors of the Second Amendment always ignore the other 20 amendments in the Constitution. So by the time the government can get into your house to take your guns, They miss all the erosions of the Fourth Amendment, all the 14th Amendment erosions. So by the time you get ready to reach for your gun, the government is already in your home. So this is important because it just, again, is a very, I hate slippery slope, but it really does set the precedent for them to really intrude on your personal liberty. And the ability of an adult to choose their spouse to whom they're not related to and is of legal age is inherent within the Constitution, regardless of whether it is originally intended or not. And I think that one of the biggest problems I have with the majority's opinion is they want to use this originalist idea of what the drafters intended and what the ratifiers intended. Let us be very clear. The ratifiers were only ratifying it for white men. They were not intending it. They were not intending it for women. They did not care about Black people. We were 3/5 of the law. So the laws of which the Constitution were written for white men. So Clarence Thomas literally gets the Boo Boo Fool Award of 2022 if he really thinks that saddling up and bojangling next to white supremacy is really going to make him more palatable. So that is what they take. So, while he's sitting here writing about this is what the Constitution intended, fool, they didn't intend you. They didn't intend you. You were not intended. You were not. So that is the biggest M. Night Shyamalan twist of the whole thing. You're like, what? Like that's, so that really is the most horrifying of the experience. But this is why men matter, because even if you don't have a daughter, if you're not heterosexually married or gay marriage, no one foresaw the pandemic coming, and no one foresaw all the rules and regulations and laws that were put in place to help mitigate and alleviate the pandemic. Those same laws are going to be used again in the next unforeseeable circumstance for you. And you will wonder, well, how can the government do this to me? How can this happen? It starts here.
Right.
It starts here.
So what can people do?
I'm gonna tell a quick anecdote. So, a couple of days ago, I was having a conversation with one of my dear friends, and I was bemoaning, being like, the Democratic Party needs to be better with their messaging. They need to be angrier. They need to, take it to the Republicans. And what she quickly pointed out to me and said to this, my dear friend Leah, she said, Nancy Pelosi can't talk to your racist Uncle Tom. That's your job. Nancy Pelosi cannot invade those spaces where Black jokes are being made and no one says anything. Chuck Schumer can't go and talk to your friends as they make snide misogynistic comments. So what can we do? The first thing we can do is Black people and Black women cannot continue to save this country. We just can't do it. We cannot do it. We cannot do it. So white people need to start having the difficult conversations at their tables during Thanksgiving about their racist Uncle Tom who continues to vote Republican. They need to continue to have conversations with their Aunt Karen, who says that she believes in women's rights, but then goes to the voting booth and votes against other women's rights. Those conversations need to be had at the table by white people to other white people. Because again, Black people cannot be expected to save this country on the backs of Black women and other Black older people. Like that's just not that's just not the case. So that's the first thing, is we need to start having difficult conversations and recognizing that all racists don't wear hoods and all misogynists don't always just pinch your butt and slap you on your ass. That they all come in different forms and they come in different ways. I just got to
listen.
Yeah.
I mean, but here's the thing. Well, first of all, we can't wait till Thanksgiving because the election will be over. So let's back up. So first of all, we ain't got time to be waiting for Thanksgiving dinner. Like literally, y'all, this is a whole sound the alarm podcast.
Right.
Like we're sounding the alarm. We need you to hear us and share this and tell other people like this. So the short answer is, well, what can you do? Well, one, there's opportunities to do something about the Senate. Everybody's frustrated. Now we'll get to the Democrats' messaging in a second, but fundamentally, understand that things aren't getting done, not because the House isn't doing their job. They're passing it. It's just not getting anywhere in the Senate. One, because the Dems we have two sort of Dems on paper. We have a filibuster that they don't have the guts to do anything about. Trust me, if it was the other way around, a filibuster would have been gone. And so either you got to come up with your 60 votes, or you have to come up with a compromise. But if everything's a non-starter because everybody's digging their heels in on political ideology, period, regardless of what the general opinion is for most Americans, they don't care. Like if the majority of Americans support a woman's right to choose. There's no doubt about that. Any other poll that you see, the majority of Americans support a woman's right to choose. They don't care about that. So if we're still stuck where we have, we're at where we are as far as the Senate, and Dems are not going to grow a pair, frankly, and do something about this filibuster, we're going to keep staying in this quagmire. There are several political races where we can shift that pendulum as far as the Senate. North Carolina is a big one. Just came from Justice Beasley's fundraiser that she had tonight. I'm a huge supporter of her. I've known her since she first made her run for Supreme Court as a Chief Justice and now running for Senate. They were doing attack ass on her before the primary because they knew that she was going to be the presumptive Democratic nominee. And she's running against a Trump Republican, which is not going to be palatable to a lot of Republican, like true traditional Republican voters, and certainly a number of independents in North Carolina. The bottom line is North Carolina can take that seat, but Dems got to do their part. They got to have strong GOTV, get out the vote campaigns. People have to care about these midterm elections in ways that they've never cared before. And the only way that they're going to care is if they have to have some sort of vested interest, because everybody's frustrated. We got a shitty ass economy, because you can cuss. We got a shitty ass economy. People are, pissed off about gas prices, foolishness going on in Ukraine. Just there's a whole lot going on. So there's a lot of reason for people to tune out. And that's what they're counting on. That's what they're counting on. They're counting on the majority of Americans to be so apathetic, to feel like that what they say doesn't matter, that their voice and their vote doesn't matter, and so that nothing changes. But there are seats that are out there that can be flipped. So anybody watching from North Carolina, you have got to get the word out. November is already here. It's here. And if the Democrats are not careful and they only focus in the areas that they've already won, it's the same thing that happened in North Carolina with Hillary. Like, damn, you came to Charlotte in 2016. Damn, sis, go somewhere else. Y'all been in Charlotte 17 times in a month. Like, we don't need to see you anymore. Go down to the coast. Go down to the rural areas where you probably can pick up votes. You got to have an Obama style campaign. You can't just stick in the metropolitan areas that are highly Democratic. We see you once, that's good. We got you, sis. We got you, bro. Go get those votes in those other parts of the state who never see a politician because they feel like their votes don't matter. And we just have to do better. And the Democrats have to have better messaging. I don't know. Is Jamie still over the DNC? Because I don't know what he's doing. I got questions. I got questions.
Again, part of the conversation I was having was, everyone's like, where's Jamie? Where's Jamie? But, again, Jamie can't go into those insular areas that can really make happen. So let's play this out. Hillary goes to the rural area and she shows up and she shakes some hands and she makes an effort. Then that next Sunday, everyone gets to dinner and then everyone sits around and someone's like, oh, I just don't like her emails. And no one says anything, right? There's nothing for Jamie Ellison to do at that point. That's on somebody there present to stand up and say, tell me why you don't think that she's qualified to be president. Tell me why you don't think Justice Beasley is qualified to be president. Tell me why you don't think, these conversations have to happen, that people have to be brave enough to be willing to alienate people that they love and have the nuanced vision to understand that just because you can disagree with someone and they may hold racist views, you can still love them, but you're still a racist. Like two things can exist within the same space, right? Mm-hmm. So just say this is old Uncle Racist Tom and I don't want to piss him off because he's a kook. Well, guess what? Old Uncle Racist Tom has 15 friends and they're all running amok, spreading lies and watching Fox News every day. right? And that's not Jamie Ellis's job to invade those spaces. His job is to make sure the best candidates get out there and to make sure that the Democrats' unified messaging is consistent with the priorities. I think it's not a messaging problem, people. I think what pisses people off, I think people were in this very performative politics era where everyone wants histrionics, where everyone wants, why aren't you doing this? Da, 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 da. But performative politics isn't working. If not to name any certain representatives or whatever, but there's some representatives who are better at tweeting than they are legislating.
Child, we got some here.
And what we need are people who are willing to get in, do the work, and write the legislation. And young people have to be engaged and have to be engaged beyond your student loans, because it has to be more than just what's important to you at this time. So let us be clear. The Republicans have been planning this for the past 50 years. This is an historic long game that has come to fruition, that was topped with the cherry with Donald Trump and his 200 federal judges that were appointed under his term. Judges, some of whom who had never practiced law a day in their life, right? So, I mean, if you think of, I can't even think of, I won't even name, but I mean, I'm sure that people we went to law school with who I was like, I wouldn't trust you with my traffic ticket. Those people are sitting with lifetime appointments on the federal level, and it will be those people that feed cases up to the Supreme Court. So this has been a 50-year long game that has been in effect. So I think that the young people have to recognize that everything is not going to magically turn overnight, that you have to be in it to win it. You have to be dedicated. You have to vote. You have to turn out every cycle. You can't sit out a cycle just because you don't like the person or they don't inspire you to some wild emotional drive. That voting and politics and governance is not an emotional exercise. And that is the most important thing that you need to recognize, is that you need to look at your candidates, do the research, because you have to, as an American, you have an obligation to be an informed and active citizen. I have all the rights you have. As we see with voting rights being taken away and under assault across the country, your right to vote is the most precious. So you have to exercise it, and exercise it constantly.
And definitely make sure that you have a voting plan now, because things can turn very quickly. If you're watching from North Carolina, the North Carolina State Board of Elections, ncsbe.gov, will be the website where you can double check your registration. If you move, if you do any of that, we still have early voting. We have an election coming up next month, I believe the July the 26th or 27th. Please, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, are municipal elections for Charlotte that oftentimes people forget about, but it's not a November election. And that particular election for the Charlotte city government, that's your mayor, that's city council, and all of that. And so especially with a lot of the issues that we're seeing in Charlotte, housing issues, budget issues, spending money on stuff, like we getting ready to put the transit center underground. I'm sorry. I'm going to get on a rant. Like, why are we doing? Right. That's what, really? We about to spend that much money to underground. No subway. No subway.
Oh.
The transit center is going underground.
Oh.
Underground.
Okay, Charlotte.
Yeah. Anyway, I digress, y'all. Sorry. But that's why your elections matter, in particular city council, in particular county commission. It's time to make some changes, but unless people come out and vote, and actually see what people are actually doing, not voting on name recognition, not voting because you know of that person or they introduce themselves to you at an event. But what are they actually doing? Like, what do they actually stand for? Do they show up for votes? What kind of things are they asking to pass? And particularly state legislators as well. Do they show up for votes? Like, have they written bills? Like, what is it that they're actually doing? These are the things, these are the questions that you have to start to ask yourself. And in particular, I think it's so important in what you said. You have the responsibility to be an active voter. You have the responsibility to be an informed voter, and to make sure that people around you, if they're not, to educate them as well, because some people aren't going to have the same impetus or the same drive to be able to do that. But it's so important that we do that, especially in this midterm. So as we wrap up, what would you say in general to people, male, female, regardless? We talked about it at the top of the hour, but how would you summarize? And don't use Harry Potter, because maybe Star Wars. Maybe we say this is okay. Yeah. Like this is where the Death Star has somehow not been blown up all to hell. But this is like Return of the Jedi. Like the Death Star is not gone. And, you know, the Jedi have to come in and do something because, you know, Darth Vader is not playing with y'all. And we don't really know if Luke's going to do it or not. Is he that dude? Is he that we can't be Luke. Like, we don't know when he gets up in the cut and he says, Luke, I'm your father. He's still going to be able to do what he's supposed to do. Like, we're not at that stage. We all need to be the little baby Jedi that are like, oh, hell no. And we got to get this taken care of. Like, this is what I don't mean. I'm not being flippant. I'm dead serious. It's either his Harry Potter scenario, my Star Wars scenario. We're code red people. This is so very serious. So very serious from this decision. And it's so very serious because what's coming next? It's contraception. It's the right to interracial marriage, gay marriage, whatever it is, it's coming. It's coming. They've signaled. And unless we have a Senate that can pass federal laws to be able to address what is happening here, it's going to be what it's going to be. But it's going to take the federal government to be able to pass legislation that will stand muster in the Supreme Court, so that obviously it doesn't become a challenge later. But we have to do something, and that something is to vote, and that something is to shift the pendulum so we have a working Senate and not just a Senate who's sitting on their thumbs trying to work out something here and there only if it makes the soundbite make sense. So, but I'm sorry. So in general, so what would you say to people in terms of why they should care about Dobbs? Because we've already talked about what people can do, but why should they care?
First, hope is not lost, right? There is still hope. There is still a chance that we could turn this around, but it's going to require more than tweets, more than angry Facebook posts. It's going to require sacrifice and time of people getting involved. You should care because as we just came off of 2 years of a very difficult pandemic for people who are used to moving freely about, and you saw how you reacted to that. So now we're coming upon the restriction of a woman's right to choose. I don't know for people who have ever seen The Handmaid's Tale, I started watching it a few years ago, and it was immediately triggered just because we were during a Donald Trump era. But that life of The Handmaid's Tale is becoming closer and closer. And you should care because if you think that you're not next, now if you're a white man, you know what? You're on easy street like Annie, because probably you won't be next. But everybody brown or with a vagina or who's gay or who's trans that you love, that you care about, that you work with could be gone. I used to remember and reading about in history about when during the Holocaust, how were the Jews taken with in the middle of their days with people, with neighbors? Why didn't people do anything? Why didn't people fight? This is how it happens. This is how atrocities happen in life, is by the thunderous sound of applause and the silence of the acquiescent majority. So you have to care because you do not want to 10, 20 years look down and recognize that you were complicit by your inaction in one of the biggest judicial election atrocities that ever hit America, next to Plessy versus Ferguson, which you can Google later on for that. So, but there's still hope. There's still a chance. So go out, vote, have the difficult conversations, and recognize is that this is your country and you can make a change.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. And so on that note, thank you guys for watching. Tune in. I'll be posting the next series next week with the series of guests. And really excited because as we get into this political season, have some excellent political candidates that will be on, and we'll be having these tough conversations, and of course encouraging you to ask the tough questions of these candidates in terms of what their political philosophy is and how they're going, what is it that they're going to do to address this. Also want to shout out the number of Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies who have, and even smaller businesses who have taken the effort and publicly said that they will support women if they're in a situation where they can't obtain an abortion in their home state, that they will be willing to pay for their travel expenses. And there have been a number of companies that have done that almost immediately. And people are at least corporate America in many ways is starting to follow suit, because that speaks to the need of people understanding why this is so important. And it's more than just the availability of an abortion. It's the right to be able to make choices for your own body as a woman, period. And understanding that this is only the beginning, and we have to be vigilant, as you said, in terms of making sure that we come out in this midterm election. So thank you. Always good to see you. Always good to chop it up with you. We are going to have to do this again as we get closer to the election, because I think we were so exhausted when this decision came out. We didn't even talk about the most recent decision as far as guns are. We didn't have time, because we would have been here all night. We just won't stay here and deal with this one. But always a pleasure. Love you to life. If you have not already done so, for you watching, if you're catching this on the replay, make sure that you go over and slide over the YouTube and subscribe at The Conversation with Yolanda Trotman. Make sure you visit the website, and of course, make sure you like, follow, and subscribe at all things at The Convo Pie Show. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. If you definitely need to make sure that you're following Roderick at Roderick Montrese over on IG. I don't know if he's going to accept your Facebook friend request, but you can go follow him on IG for sure. So I don't know, you may or may not accept, maybe. We'll see. Maybe. But y'all have a good night, everyone. I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks, Rod. Love you to life. And I will see you guys soon. Good night, everyone.
Good night.